Welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast, where we break down the practical strategies of this emerging science, starting with healthy light habits and going wherever the quantum superhighway takes us. This is your host, Meredith Oke, and we'd also love to hear from you. Visit www.quantumbiologycollective.org and click QBC newsletter to join the conversation. In this episode, we're doing something a little different and airing an interview that the lovely Dr. Kelli Ritter of the Nourished Soul podcast did with yours truly. We talk about my journey to learning about light and discuss some of the key aspects of a circadian lifestyle. We've had lots of requests to cover the basics, and Kelli does a beautiful job of going over everything. Enjoy.
Welcome, Meredith. I'm so excited to have you on the show to talk with you. I'm enjoying getting to know you a little bit through the Quantum Biology Collective. So to be able to hear more about your story and just talk to you, I'm super grateful.
Thank you. Well, I'm really happy to have you here. I really enjoy your energy, and every time you come on a call, it really brightens things up, and you have a lot of wisdom and insight to share, and I'm delighted to hang out with you.
I appreciate that. I'm loving it. I love the calls. I love the content. So I think it's just amazing. So I really want to hear about like your life before quantum. Like, what were you doing and kind of what was happening, and how is it that you started the quantum TV and quantum collective the Quantum Biology Collective? But it probably makes more sense to talk about what brought you to quantum in the first place.
Sure.
So maybe just start wherever you want in terms of your life before quantum and what was going on for you. And then we'll see where we go.
Absolutely. So it's kind of funny that I am where I am. In some ways, what I'm doing as the founder of the Quantum Biology Collective makes a lot of sense because I'm drawing on different experiences and capacities that I built up over time. But in many ways, it makes no sense. Like I wake up and I'm like, what am I doing? How did I get here?
Yeah.
But I got here. I mean, I think that the simplest answer is that at a certain point in my life, which I would say was in my early 30s, I somehow decided to just hand my life over to my intuition and not to that part of our minds that wants to plan everything and make it fit in boxes. That decision was made for me out of necessity because I didn't fit in any boxes. I would always like do this and then do that and then be here and then be there. And I didn't, make sense to people or to myself. So that sort of started me on a journey to find a way to live that did make sense to me. And some of the work that I had to do was sort of reining in some behaviors that were like really making my life a roller coaster. And some of the work was coming to a place of acceptance that I'm not a person who's going to follow a predetermined track and tick the boxes as I go along, at least in terms of sort of what I do professionally or with my time. In other ways, I am definitely a person who did that. I got married and my husband and I have 3 children. We lived all over the world for his job. When my kids were 1 and 3, we moved to Hong Kong and lived there for 5 years. My 3rd child was born there. Then we moved to France. We lived just outside of Paris for 4 years. And then we're Canadian and now we're in the US. So we've really, and even within the US, I've lived in my 20s, I lived on the West Coast. I'm now in the Northeast. We lived in the South for a little bit. We lived in the Midwest for a little bit. I just like to collect experiences, which kind of ends up putting you a little bit outside of the culture. So you see things from a slightly different perspective when you're constantly a newcomer to the culture that you're in.
Right.
And how that relates is that when I started to feel unwell, which was for me, chronic fatigue started when I was living in Hong Kong, I think I was unconsciously making a lot of very bad choices in
Mm-hmm.
terms of circadian biology, especially.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in a high rise. I was inside a lot. My light bulbs were terrible. I was on screens all the time. I didn't, there was a lot of things. I think there were a lot of seed oils in the food that I didn't think about. Like, just like so many
So many
different.
things. Yeah.
Everyone wants like that smoking gun. Like, what caused the chronic fatigue? There's like so many factors.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got pregnant, which made it all worse. Um, and I did a lot of things, probably a
Mm-hmm.
lot of your audience has, would think to do when you have a condition where your doctor's like, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Your labs are fine. You're fine.
Right.
And yeah, you're in this, where you're like, the medical system's like, well, you're not sick enough for us to do anything, but
Mm-hmm.
life is impacted on a day-to-day basis in really critical ways. So I went
Yeah.
down, I did, I worked with a lot of amazing people. I did worked with naturopaths and
Mm-hmm.
nutrition people, and I did supplements and cleanses and all kinds of stuff that helped. It was good, but I just couldn't get rid of that feeling of overwhelming fatigue that was not solved by sleeping, right? Like it would just be like
Right.
multiple times a day. I would have to like lie down. I would do like 4-minute naps. Like I would like lie down and just like feel my body shut down. And then I'd lie there for like 3 minutes and then I could get back up and keep going.
Whew.
Um,
With 3 little kids.
yeah.
I'm just taking that in. And were you still in Asia, or are you back in the United States?
So at this point, I started to see practitioners when I was in Hong Kong.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
There's a really large expat community there. So they were all, American or British or English speaking people. I also saw traditional Chinese medicine,
Sure.
acupuncture, of course.
Sure. You're there. Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
there. They were obviously there. Some wonderful people. And like I said, it all helped,
Mm-hmm.
but it couldn't move the needle and
Yeah.
far enough to really feel like, okay, I can get up in the morning and live my life.
Whew.
And I would still do all the things. So it was like, I would like
Mm-hmm.
pour all my energy into like going on a ski trip or doing a certain thing. And then I'd just be like
Wiped out.
wiped. And so people didn't know, like if you talk to my friends from that time, they might not even have known, because
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of anything more boring to talk about than how tired you are all the time. It's just not that fun.
Yeah. Well,
Just
and
to myself,
really, you're
manage.
doing all the things to try and make it better. So you feel like it should be better. And so you just keep, and as a mother and a wife, and were you working also? Were you able to work there? Or?
Yeah, I did. I was working very part-time, but I was doing executive coaching. Yeah.
Right. So, my goodness. Okay. So something had to give.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what my experience was, that sort of putting my focus on alternative health or integrative health or whatever you want to call it,
Uh-huh.
the overwhelming sort of feedback that comes from that community is to manage your food.
Right.
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 It's the answers are all in there. And
Mm-hmm.
if that's not working, it's because I'm not doing it properly.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and no one, I was trying to think, I'm like, did anyone actually ever say that to me? Like, no, they didn't. But that was the feeling, like you read all the blogs about like being in ketosis and doing all this and doing all that. And like, there's just, no matter what I was doing, there was always something more. It's like, okay, well, I'm doing this. Oh, but I could be doing that. Oh, but I could, and so, because I had done a lot of work previously to like catch myself when I was falling into, thinking patterns that weren't leading anywhere. I was like, I don't think this is working. And I don't think it's me. Right. Like, I think something is missing, but I don't know what it is. But if micromanaging my food was going to work, it would
It
work.
would have worked. Right. Yeah. Right.
And on top of that is I'm not a food person. I like to eat, but I have,
Yeah.
I found out when I was like 40 that I have ADHD, the girl kind, where you're just like,
Yeah.
anyway, it's like a whole thing, but like managing details, micros, macros, and how many grams, like I
Yeah.
was like, I can't. And I had this moment in my kitchen, um, in France. I had ordered a spiralizer
Oh, right.
tune my zucchini into spaghetti.
Yep.
And I was like staring at this thing and I was like, I do not want to use it. And I remember there was like this blog that were like, you turn zucchini into spaghetti, your kids will love it. I'm like, they will not love it.
Yeah.
That's
They
really
will.
what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I had this moment where I was like, okay. And then I just turned everything off and sat with myself in my kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing when you move around a lot, you do get a lot of alone time because nobody knows you. So you're not expected anywhere, you're new. So I had a lot of introspective time at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I have listened to so many things and read so many things. Like there must be a clue somewhere that I missed or that I wasn't ready for. And now I'm ready. So let's like, and I sat there, I got really quiet and I flashed to an interview that I had seen and watched and digested, but not really
Yeah.
fully understood. And
Right.
it was Dr. Jack Cruz talking about the importance of light.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's the
And
key that just
there's
opened the door.
right. And it's like, this probably from all the work you've done. When people are ready and the right message
That's
appears, it's like, and that's what happened. I went back and rewatched it
mm-hmm.
and it was like, oh. And then that started me down the rabbit hole.
Woo. That's quite, I mean, as a mother, I'm just thinking about how tired we all are with young kids doing all the things anyway, and to deal with chronic fatigue for, on top of all of the things that you were doing in other countries with different, I mean, just the layers, Meredith, just really
Yeah.
are remarkable. And yes, you're right. When the student is ready, the teacher appears, the information appears. And I was similar in terms of I was interested in mitochondria and I was taking it in, I thought, and trying to digest it, but I didn't really get it until I started understanding light. I think that was it's just the key to the
Yeah.
front door. And
Yeah.
sometimes we got to walk all the way around the barn to find the front door. And we're like, oh, the front door.
Yeah.
And as a practitioner, I've always and told my students too, like, you might see the front door, but you can't, if you just try to take your client or your patient or whatever straight to the front door before they're ready, they don't see it. They're not going to stay. It's not going to stick. You just have to companion them for as long as it takes till they see the front door.
Yeah.
And then you just offer them the key if they'd like. And there you go. So I appreciate that so much too, because I heard yesterday when you're like, I wanted to find something that wasn't food. I was like, oh, I need to ask Meredith, like, what was, like, I was already trying the food thing. I am not spiralizing any more vegetables. I've got to figure out something else is missing here. And so I really love that. I appreciate that a lot, that you were in that place. And I also really appreciate about that story that you got quiet and just, I think we spend a lot of time trying to find the answers outside of ourselves. I know I do that instead of just getting quiet and going inward and letting something bubble up.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's so true. Because like there is so much in there. And I'm gonna guarantee that anyone who listens to the Nourished Soul podcast is somebody who has put a lot in there. And yeah, like who knows what messages are waiting to come up when we need them.
Right. Right. And I think the other piece that has always been really key for me, my dad used to say, never, never, never give up. And I feel like there's so many times where I'm like, oh, I just don't feel like doing another thing. I'm doing all the things. Why don't I feel better? And to realize that, actually I have an experience with my 17-year-old, maybe even a couple weeks ago, where he was like, I'm just done. Like, I don't want to try anything else. I'm done with all your stuff, your weird potions and all your blue drinks and all your weird stuff. I'm just done. And I get that. I really do. But I said to him through the bathroom door, actually, I was like, yelling at him through the bathroom door saying, do you feel amazing? And he's like, no. And I was like, is your sleep really great? Are you feeling? And he's like, no. I was like, then we're not done. Like, yeah, I'll give you a break. I'll quit giving you blue potions to drink. I hear you. I know that place in myself where I'm like just so done. But also, if you're not feeling good most of the time, you're not done. Like, you don't have to feel terrible. You don't even have to feel bad, like not great. I mean, you can feel really, really good most of the time. And if you don't, then you probably just haven't found your front door, and you haven't found the key.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's so true, Kelly. And like, it's multiple doors. Like you did
Right.
your trauma work, and
Yep.
I did I did all the stuff. And then I got to the physical door, and I needed the key with the light. And I feel like the message, because so this is like a major paradigm shift, right?
Mm, right.
What happens when we're getting to the end of an old paradigm, which we are with the biochemical approach to health, right? Like, it's just not sufficient
Mm,
to explain what's going on with people anymore.
right.
All of the anomalies start to pile up, and it's like, well, just do this, and this, and you'll be fine. And it's like, okay, but I'm not, and she's
Mm,
not, and he's not, and they're not, and all these
mhm,
anomalies are piling up. But before that gets acknowledged,
mhm.
all of us anomaly people are living in this place where we feel like there's no more answers.
Right.
But like, that's kind of the message that we get if we stop searching. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, well, okay, I guess I'm supposed to need 3 naps a day when I'm 39 years old. Like, okay, I have another 40, 50 years to go. This doesn't, right. Like,
Right. Mhm.
um, but what I find is like the great good news about all this
Yeah.
is to realize there's so many things that were working against us that we didn't even know. And so when we can get out from under that,
Right.
it opens up a whole new level of feeling better that
Mm,
nobody told us about because they don't know it exists.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, it's really worth it to keep digging. And I hear your son, and I've had lots of those moments too. And I
Right.
think that moment with the spiralizer, I was like, yeah, you know what? Like,
Yeah.
another thing. And that's also what's
Yeah.
fun about light, though, is that once you get just a few little habits changed, it actually becomes kind of fun. Like,
Right.
I find it way more fun to go for a walk outside than spiralize my zucchini.
Right. Yeah. Or just go hang out in the sun for a bit. So much easier than all of the other stuff that we tried. Yeah. So if people are listening and they're like, wait, what is quantum biology? Like, what are they talking about with light? Perhaps we should talk a little bit more about what that is, and what we mean by that.
Yes. Well, so for me, it was there's there's circadian biology, which explains how we're basically programmed by light.
Mhm.
And then underneath that, to explain how it is true that we're programmed by light, then we got to go quantum,
Right.
which is a very, very, very new emerging science. And if anyone on here is a physicist or is married to a physicist, they're going to be like, "That's not true. Those ladies are wrong. There's no quantum mechanical processes in warm, wet living systems." That's
Yeah.
And yet there's now evidence that
Yeah.
there is.
Right.
So I would love. So that's sort of like how I landed in that. What I'd love to hear your take on quantum biology.
Yeah. So I didn't know it was that new, and I didn't think anything of it because I'm not a physicist. And
Right.
right. So I came to it and I was like, oh, this is amazing. these subatomic particles that are inside of our cells. That makes perfect sense to me. Like, of course, they're being influenced by light. Yeah, I didn't realize that they're a whole, like, that's so new and that people are like, wait, what? That just seemed so natural to me when,
Right.
like I
Yeah.
was just like, yes, that's just amazing. And when somebody, yeah, probably Carrie Bennett, one of the instructors that I love, said, it comes down to these electrons, and I started understanding the gathering of electrons, and it really expanded my world of like, it's more than the food. Thank goodness, because one, people don't actually really like to change their food. They say they want to feel better, but we don't actually want to change our food that much. Like, there are things we're willing to tweak, like the seed oils but you're right. And that was my experience too, is like some people have a lot of issues with the food, and we can get really caught up there, and it's just, not our thing, or it's too much of our thing or whatever. So to learn that there was so much more to gathering electrons
Yeah.
and it just, so many stories flashed from my childhood of like being barefoot and outside and just not worrying, about sunscreen and all of the things, and how much better I felt in the times in my life when those things were naturally happening.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that really protected me a lot with the yo-yos or the Twinkies or whatever we were
Yeah.
eating. There was so much protection, and it made sense to me that what we're in now, we not only are we have the, weird manufactured food that we're opening packages to eat, so it's confusing our mitochondria, but it's also none of the other protective things are there.
Yeah.
We're not running around barefoot outside, and we're, covering from the sun and
Yes.
getting like the latest cool sunglasses, and you know so that was a long way to answer you.
I love it. I
It's
love that. No. And it's so true because I have like a friend who works in pharma and biotechnology, and like he's just like, he looks at me, he's like, I'm like, no, there's science on this. He's like, yeah, pseudoscience, right? Like, and then I have a friend who teaches meditation, and she's like, what do you mean people don't know that there's quantum mechanics happening in the human body? Of course there are, right? Like,
right.
it just really depends sort of what paradigm you're operating
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
for this information. And um, I always have read for a long time all the woo-woo books.
Yeah.
I read other books too, but I always did read, and they were always talking about quantum mechanics. And then the quantum physicists were like, those woo-woo people are twisting our science, making it woo-woo.
Yeah.
But now, like, there's a lot of the research is really there to show that it's not woo-woo, like it's real.
Right.
Mm, and it's really exciting. Like this is published research by academic people who do not want to be wrong.
Right. Their careers
Yeah.
are relying on them not being wrong. And I just think it's so exciting. Like, things at the quantum level, what I think of, we're talking about quantum smallest, looking at small, but the
Mhm.
fact that these subatomic particles can change their behavior
Yeah.
just by being observed. I'm like, how cool is that? Like,
Yeah.
what is that about? That makes me feel something about consciousness, like how
Mhm.
something can shift just by being observed. Um, that sounds really, not that far out there. It sounds really cool to me. Not that I understand any of, you know,
I
these light
know.
bulbs go off and then they're like just there. I'm like, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. I just feel something, and it feels exciting.
Yeah, and it really is, right? Because even our understanding of the mitochondria is quite new. So
Right.
for non-biology people, which is me, like, I didn't know any of these words up until a few years ago. Uh, so our cells are filled with mitochondria, right? And
Right.
there's a researcher called Dr. Doug Wallace who has shown that most disease is actually mitochondrial dysfunction and not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily genetic. There are a few outliers that are still genetic diseases, but most things that we think about.
Yes.
So our mitochondria are filled with basically like environmental sensors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of our cells all of the time
Mm-hmm.
are sensing are sensing the frequency of our environment. And if we go really woo, like light is actually, it seems like what light matters. Once you go quantum, light is actually the most materialistic of all the things that we're sensing.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that, and all of that information that's coming from light is being picked up by our mitochondria. So when it's junk light, man-made light, it's screwing it up, and when it's natural light, it's helping it, creating a quantum coherence.
Right.
And that was a metaphor that really helped me as a non-science person.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, okay. Like it's like a little, like all these little sensors are just
Like a
constantly
little antenna. These
scanning. Yeah.
antennae. Yeah. That
And if
are.
I put my phone on factory settings in front of my eyeballs and my skin in front of those sensors at 9 o'clock at night in January in New York State,
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling my body it's noon in July, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then everything gets thrown into chaos. So then we get sick and we get tired and fat and all of the things.
That's right. And that's what brings us to light. And the light is one of the easiest things to tweak. So it's kind of great that's, once you just start making a few changes, like opening the window in front of your computer when you're working and getting blue blockers at night. I think for me, I was religious about sunrise. Like it had become this really important ritual practice for me. No matter where I am or where I'm traveling, I'm up searching for the sunrise. You don't actually have to have a good view. I want to make sure people understand they don't have to go find the view. But to be out in that light, I was religious about that, but I didn't become protective of my indoor light till I learned really more about the circadian biology and understanding quantum biology. Yeah, I don't know, missed that piece.
Yeah.
It's not that it wasn't there.
It takes a little while to wrap your head around, right? Like
Yeah.
the idea that your light bulbs are bad for you, like it's really weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and even like wearing the blue blockers, yeah, it took me a while. I did a consult with Dr. Jack Cruz, like a few months into all the research. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I like booked a call with him, and he was in the US and I was in Europe. So it was evening for me and daytime for him. And I get on the call and he's like, what time is it where you are? I'm like, I don't know, like 8:30. He's like, where are your blue blockers? And I was like, yes, I got on a call with Dr. Cruz at night with no blue blockers on. And I was like, you really serious about that? Like that really works? And he was like, yes.
Yeah.
But it just, I like to tell that story because I was reading all the research. I was listening to all the things. I was listening to him explain why you needed to wear them and how they worked. But I just couldn't. I mean, I also had a lot of chronic fatigue, brain fog, so I was a little slow.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't, like, I just couldn't get there until he like yelled at me in my face. And I was like, oh, right, I'm being an idiot. Sitting in front of my computer without any protection at night with the blue light like blazing into my eyeballs.
Right. Oh, I love that though. And I love that he just didn't, he didn't just gloss over that and keep talking to you. He's like, no, you've got to be protected while we're talking.
Yeah.
That's funny because most practitioners won't do that. So that's
he's not most people.
He is not. He is a unique human being.
He'll just yell at you. It's good.
Yeah, that's funny. So I'm like, okay, so take me to how did you start Quantum TV? Which came first, Quantum TV or the Quantum Biology Collective?
Yes. So Quantum Health TV came out of the fact that, so then I started to get into this and my husband was like, what are you doing? And I brought him on the call with Dr. Cruz, and then Dr. Cruz yelled at him. He's like, all right, I'm in.
Okay. All right.
Well, if you have a skeptical partner, bring them on a call sometime.
Oh, I'm going to have to do that. Okay. Mental made a note. Thanks. Uh-huh.
So we started researching and researching, and we were like, wow, this is amazing. All the research is there. There was like, I think it was 2017, 2018, they gave the Nobel Prize to a guy who'd been studying circadian rhythms in flies or something, So there was a Nobel Prize. And we're like, oh, well, now everyone's going to start talking about it. And then nothing. And then there was a great article in 2019 in Outside magazine called Sunscreen is the New Margarine.
Nice. Yeah. Love it.
It was really great. He did a really great job, like just very gently being like, maybe we're being a little overprotective here, and that there are some health benefits to being in the sun. And that became the most downloaded article in the history of Outside magazine.
Wow.
I was like, okay, here we go. Now everyone's going to start talking about it. Nothing. And what happened for us was that during COVID, our world kind of got turned upside down, and my husband ended up taking a sabbatical, and we moved to Louisiana for a year. And he's in marketing, and I have a background in coaching and media. And we were like, what if we're the ones that are supposed to organize this information? So we just started very slowly, like making videos and interviewing as many experts as we could find on the topic, and organizing the information for people who were not in a place where they were going to spend like hundreds of hours sifting through.
And it's awesome. Like, I'm getting teary because I'm like, isn't it amazing how the universe will work, and how we just are like, oh no, I can't be the one that's supposed to do that. And then you're like, apparently you are. So, and it's beautifully done. So whatever your background is, like the videos, I'm very, inspired. The material's great, but the presentation is really well done. And so I knew you must have some background to figure that piece out. Very well done.
Thank you, Kelly. I really, really appreciate that. Yes.
Yeah.
For anyone who has a little voice where there's some project, they're like, when is someone going to do that? Well, yeah, maybe it's you.
Yeah.
And then the amazing part has been the people that come, right? Like meeting you, and everyone comes and brings a slightly different flavor. And then they ingest and internalize this new understanding, and then they go out and do all these amazing things, like all these wonderful things.
The people are very cool. And it's just nice to be with other people that are curious like this. I mean, just trying to help people or themselves or their families. Those are the people who come, who have reached a point of like, there has to be some other key that we're missing. There has, or they've figured it out for themselves. Like a lot of the docs have figured these things out. And so it's just a lot of really cool people and then the Quantum Biology Collective came. Is that how that?
Yeah. So that grew out of, we first were just presenting, doing the videos, and we just were paying attention to what people needed. And we realized the need was for a practitioner level training, because most people just wanted to understand what to do.
Yeah.
Like they were like, okay, I believe you. Like, what kind of light bulbs do I buy? Right.
Right.
So we realized that the layer that needed to understand this information were the people working
with the people,
the patients, and the people who are unwell. So my first thought was like, well, like the naturopathic colleges or the medical schools. So I started asking all these doctors when I interviewed them, how long till they're going to teach this? They were all like, oh, like at least 20 years.
Right.
So I was like, but the research is all here now. And they're like, yeah, but this is institutional education. It takes decades to change. So I started looking into it, and there's something called the translational gap, which is sort of that gap between a new discovery, whether it's like penicillin or the
hand washing or
hand washing, or
yeah.
the fact that, the sun, that we live in a heliocentric universe, like whatever it is, there's a gap between knowing that to, finding it out, the discovery, and the integration of it as an accepted
Practice in education too. Got it.
Yeah. So whether it's putting something new on the market, but even just getting new ideas into the street, into the information flow, takes a really long time.
Right.
So I'm like, well, we live in a decentralized world now, right? We don't have to wait for those institutions to catch up. We just build it.
Right. We just built it.
We're building it.
Yeah, you're building it. I'm so grateful because I don't even know how I ended up here, but I am just because I thought I kind of already knew stuff. I had taken some of Carrie Bennett's workshops, and it just brought it all home in a way that was really helpful for me personally, professionally. So I'm so glad that you did, because I can't tell you how many degrees and trainings and certifications I've done. And this is the first time that I've really felt like this is just so powerful and so simple, but so powerful. So I'm grateful that you followed that little voice and said, well, let's put it together then for the rest of those that need it.
Thank you. I'm really moved to hear that's your experience. And we do hear that. And as I was saying, it's people from different backgrounds, right? Like mental health or naturopathic or, fitness people, right? And they're like, this is connecting all the dots, right? Like there's pieces of wisdom that they knew from their experience and their own knowledge. And now they're like, oh, that's why this works, or that's how to connect it back to this. Filling in all these dots.
Yeah. So you've interviewed some of the most amazing people. That's got to be super fun for you, that you've gotten to talk to all these doctors and ophthalmologists, neurologists, cardiologists, like all of these people. I don't know if you can sum that up, or if you have some takeaways that, just the things that really seemed to have stuck with you through those interviews. You've mentioned some of them, but I wondered if there's anything else that you want to share about all of that.
Sure. Yeah. It's one of the things that most of them, not all of them, most of them have in common. Well, actually, no, about half, right? Is that they struggled with some sort of illness themselves.
Right.
Like Dr. Jay Montgomery, who's an
ophthalmologist.
Yeah, he does eye surgery all day long at a clinic. He was having some kind of neurodegenerative situation that nobody could explain. And it was getting worse and worse, to the point where he was on multiple medications. This was a person who ate paleo and did CrossFit like 3 to 4 times a week. Like, right. Like, this was not an unhealthy person by any traditional measure.
Right.
And nobody could explain what was happening, why his brain was not working anymore. And the best that they could offer him, as it was getting worse and worse, they're like, well, we could try operating. We could just take out the part of your brain that's not working. And he was like,
that doesn't seem smart, right? I'll keep that part. Thanks. Yeah.
So that sent him down the rabbit hole, and he somehow came across the work of Dr. Cruz and started going down, and was able to trace the origins of his symptoms to when his practice switched over to electronic records. And his day became almost 100% screen-based.
Right. Oof.
As he's looking for the surgery, you look through those things, you look through the little magnifying things that are lit. But then you spend any time you're not in surgery, he was on a screen.
Records and
Yeah. And he over time reversed. And so I think that's something that really found with a lot of these practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then a lot of them just became very disillusioned with their jobs and their training and what they were prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
And they were realizing that by the time people got in front of them, it was
Bad.
quite late. I don't want to say too late, but very late in the game. And they
Mm-hmm.
knew that there would have been ways to help people earlier,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't prepared for it and they weren't trained for it.
Right. Yes.
They
Mm-hmm.
all, so another thing that they all 100% of them have in common is that they are in private practice and they do not operate in large
Mm-hmm.
insurance-based models, which don't have any space for preventative care.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They all had that. And yeah, I love the theme. I appreciate that, Meredith, as a qualitative researcher, when you said, so the themes, I'm like, yes, that's what I'm after.
Okay.
What did you glean from,
Yeah.
what are the themes that you keep kind of coming up? So we talked about light, but I just am curious about like what other changes, specific kinds of changes are your favorite in the whole quantum techniques, circadian biology? What are the things that you've changed that you felt like really made a big difference?
So the first one was, spending more time outside,
Right.
opening windows.
Yeah.
Unless it's pouring rain, I always have my sunroof open or
Yeah.
the window cracked if I'm on the highway.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
that it also enhances my mood because I know I'm doing something healthy, right? Like, so it's very fun in that way, right? They're like, oh, I just opened my
Totally.
window crack and now,
And
now
I'm like healthy.
that's all I had to do.
I love that. That is true. I find the same thing. When you're evaluating the day at the end of
Yeah.
the day and you're like, I cracked my window. I sat in front of a cracked
Yeah.
window. Yay, me.
Yeah. And to antidote it, right? If I'm in a situation where I've been under a really crappy light, I'm like, I'm just going to go outside and have a sun break. And I know that I'm breaking. So yeah, just going outside more and appreciating the value of that.
Right.
Definitely a
Right.
big one. We changed our light bulbs. We have lamps in our house with incandescent bulbs, and those are on in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not like, it's not that big a deal. Like everyone, because people do think, because most homes now have all these recessed lightings with these huge bright LEDs, and it's like, don't replace all those. I mean, if you want to, you can. There's ways to do it, but we just don't turn them on. That's the way.
Mm-hmm.
And in the rooms that we use in the evening, we have lamps with incandescent bulbs.
Yep.
I have a little amber reading lamp light that I use to read before bed from a book.
Yep.
I was reading books on my iPad. When I discovered this information, I would be reading books about chronic fatigue on my iPad before I went to sleep, wondering.
In the bright light, you might have been next to a lamp, but still, it's just bright. Right.
The LEDs on. Yes. And then the last thing, and we did this a little bit later, and I was really surprised at what a big difference it made, is that we moved our dinner earlier.
Yep.
Right. Because food is circadian input. So you want to like eat breakfast, within about a half hour of getting up. But you also want to have like a totally empty stomach when you go to sleep, because the food is another circadian input telling your body it's daytime.
Right.
And it was a really fun experiment that I totally encourage people to try. We did not change what we were eating at all. We just stopped eating earlier.
Yeah, you started eating earlier.
All lost weight and we all slept better, like immediately. It's amazing. That was a really fun one.
That is amazing. Just shifting. So in all of your work with people and listening, I mean, do people utilize fasting? Because when we're talking about circadian, I've really changed my understanding, my belief, and just shifted it earlier. So we're still fasting overnight.
Yeah.
But I'm sort of on the fence at the moment about utilizing fasting for longer periods. I don't know if you have thoughts about that. care?
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't totally get into all of the stuff. So
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of talk about fasting. I do see a recommendations of having like a shorter, they say feeding window, which
Window.
I really
Hmm.
enjoy as a term.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Say like opportunities to have a meal.
There you go. Yeah, I love
Um,
that. Hmm.
and I do see people recommending like not eating until the middle of the day. And then
Hmm.
I would say from a circadian perspective,
Yeah.
if you're going to fast, you would want to eat breakfast in the morning and stop eating very, very early in the day.
Earlier.
You really
Hmm.
want that meal window to be short.
Yeah. That's what I'm seeing too. That makes sense to me from our circadian
Mhm.
perspective. But I think the challenge is shifting these. You've been doing something your whole life a certain way, or even 6 months a certain way. You believe that it's helpful, and now you're getting new information. It's that paradigm shift for people. Like, what the light's important when I'm eating is probably more important than what I'm eating. What? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just shifting for people.
Yeah, it is. And we have, yeah, that response where we hear something and we're like, this is the thing, right? Like, and we get really attached to it as an idea. And
Hmm.
then we hear other conflicting information and then we want to be like, no, you're wrong. That can't be right because I found the thing.
I know. I know.
So it is, yeah,
Yeah.
continually adapting.
Yeah. Well, I'm mindful of our time too. So I'm just like, what else? I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, Meredith. So
It's fun. I could too.
I know. I'm like, okay, well, so what's really nourishing to your soul? You're doing all
Mm.
this stuff. I'm super grateful that you're putting it all out in the world and making it available to people that can't be easy, as well as being a mother and a wife and all the things that you do. So, what really nourishes your soul?
Oh, that's a lovely question. And a good question because one of the pieces to the chronic fatigue for me was, and this was the last piece that I put
Mhm.
in that I figured out after, I'm like, well, I
Mhm.
got to fix this and I got to fix that. But actually, what I realized I was doing is that I was sort of overspending on my energy, right? So I would
Mhm.
make all of these changes to restore my energy and then I'd add more stuff. Because I was just so used to always being at the line and it
Mm.
felt it actually felt uncomfortable to have space in my life.
Ah, interesting.
So I kept, so the soul question is very interesting
Mhm.
because uh, it's a crucial part of the whole process, right? Like if I am unable to have the time to know what does nourish my soul and B to
Mhm.
include it in my life, um, I'm not going to get better. I'm not
Right,
going to stay better. I'm going to keep pushing past that line.
right.
So
Mhm.
nourishing my soul, I would definitely say spending time with my children.
Mhm.
I'm not a person who like gets down on the floor and plays with them, but I just like to be around them. I like to be home when they're home and listen to them tell me things and watch their journey and watch them
Mhm.
get interested in stuff and learn things and I'm like, oh, this one's really into music. Okay. And like, oh, so is this one, but in a totally different way. Like that's so interesting to me. And
Mhm.
um, yeah, I feel really grateful that I somehow ended up in a place where
Mhm.
appreciate just who they are. And of course, I
Mhm.
have moments where, of course,
Yeah,
no,
right,
like, don't
right.
talk with your mouth full and to put your blue blockers on if you're going to play Fortnite and blah, 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 blah. Right. But I do find that every day I try to find those moments where I'm just
Mhm.
like, these
Yeah,
are my children.
I get that. Yeah. My 20-year-old, I got him from the airport last night and I woke up this morning and there's just something so comforting about having a full house where everybody's here, even if they don't all stay here for, the weekend's coming up, so we'll probably lose one of them to friends and stuff. But I just, yeah, to really take in who they are as people.
Yes.
I, as opposed to all the things that we have to do for them or with them or to them, just to take just a minute to be in awe of who they are as people. And
Yes.
that's really fun. Yeah,
That's
that can
exactly.
be very nourishing um, in the midst of all the
Yes.
chaos of 3 kids. Yeah.
And then there's also, yeah, I do also things that are completely just for myself,
Yeah.
usually. There are self-care things which I'm also bad about, but I'm getting better at putting them in my calendar. And then I also just, you know, need to go to some really weird esoteric places sometimes and read
Mhm.
books and literature that just sort of take me out of the here and now and the hustle bustle of day-to-day life and expand my consciousness to a place where I'm like, oh, down.
Reminds you of, I don't know how small and how magnificent all of it is.
Yeah.
So I get that. Yeah. What are some of these places? Do we need to meet at some of these weird esoteric places?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably is. Yeah. And then yeah, do like a meditation from that space that kind of like, it's like that tingly feeling where when you were little,
Mhm.
um, and you watched a movie about magic or someone read you a story about magic and you had that like tingly feeling.
Yeah.
I really think that we get to have that as grown-ups.
Mhm.
And whether even if I need to just suspend my disbelief of all the grown-up things I know about the world and just let magic be real and feel that tingly feeling.
Oh, love it. That's beautiful. I am so appreciative of your time. Um, I will make sure that people know how to get to the Quantum Health TV and to all of the things that we talked about. Is there anything else that we missed that you wanted to share?
Um, yeah, I think I would just say I just want to share that like it's really possible. You said this earlier, Kelly, it's
Mm,
possible to feel good. You
it
know,
is.
it's all
It,
right to just let ourselves off the hook of all the thoughts that are
mhm.
convincing us it's not okay to feel good or there's no way to do it. Uh,
Yeah. And I
yes.
appreciate so much that you brought up the when you get used to living like right next to the edge or whatever we would call that, that it can be actually uncomfortable to be free. And
Yes.
so people are like, yes, I want freedom. Yes, I want to feel fantastic, but it can actually feel quite disorienting. And so just to know that that's part of the process of it too, and let
Yes.
that just be, you
Yeah.
know.
Absolutely. And that was a big learning curve for me.
Me too.
Yeah, I was like, I just want to feel okay. I just want to feel. And then it occurred to me one day when I was able to observe my patterns, as you were saying, I'm like, oh, I'm actively doing things to make situations where I don't feel okay. And then I'm like, oh, because I don't even know what that would
Mhm.
feel like. I don't have that I
Yeah.
can't feel it as a goal. And I found this meditation. I wish I could remember where I heard it because I would give this person credit because I used it my whole life. But anyway, he was like, for 5 minutes, just pretend everything's okay.
Ooh, I like that.
Oh, okay. And I couldn't do 5 minutes. So I would do like 30 seconds to a
Sure.
minute. And I was like,
Mhm.
this is what it feels like. All right. And I
Yeah.
really started to notice that I would pull myself out of that feeling of okay.
Mhm.
And I had to put myself there, like I had to lie to myself and pretend. And then my mind would be like, there's this and there's this and there's this. And I'd be like, yeah, okay. Just for 5 minutes, you don't exist.
Mhm.
And now I can
Mhm.
visit that place every day.
Mm. Right. I love that because, there's a practitioner that's pretty popular that talks about being able to visualize, the other side. What is it? And I found that I thought I could do that, but in actuality, looking back, I didn't know what it felt like to feel amazing. So how was I supposed to imagine that? And how are you supposed to feel that? So I like that practice of just for 30 seconds, pretend like it's all good. It's all really good and you feel great. And it's all, just to start that practice of letting, because your mind, it's a great tool, but it also gets in the way. And so we've got to put it in its place and help it find its place so that we can create some space and then begin to feel what it might feel like if you really felt okay all the time. What would that be like?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I appreciate that because I think that's hard to explain until you've been through it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And maybe
it doesn't make sense to everyone, but to people for whom it makes sense. It's like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah. 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 So for the people who that didn't make sense, that's okay. Let that go. Just know that it's hopeful. The point is that it's hopeful and that at any time if you're open to it, the universe can support you even in the midst of what feels awful.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Meredith, so much for being here.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I love our conversation.
This has been the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. To find a practitioner who works from this point of view, visit our directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. If you are a practitioner, definitely check out our Applied Quantum Biology certification to consider as part of your continuing education plan. You can also just jump into our email community. We'd love to hear from you. Again, that's at quantumbiologycollective.org.